The sudden jump in eccentricities had a drastic effect on the system as a whole. The Saturnian planets were wrenched out of polar alignment as their respective spin rates accelerated in response to the Saturn system's displaced forward momentum. The multi-resonant state was suddenly broken, permanently upsetting the primeval state of our solar system. No longer axially synchronized, individual charge sheets formed around each planet as the conjoined plasmasphere of Jupiter and Saturn subdivided, electrically isolating them from one another. Saturn was displaced from its polar position, and the gaseous envelope surrounding the Saturnian planets began to disperse. The Nice model notably suggests that the instability that our multi-resonant planetary system suffered was quite likely to be severe, given that the initial interplanetary separations were smaller. That is, when the initial planetary configuration is more compact, more interplanetary encounters will occur when the configuration is scattered, outbound migrations will be rapidly excited and accelerated, the migrating planets will be driven more distantly from the original configuration, and the more spaced out with respect to each other will displaced planets eventually be. It is here suggested that the swift-moving dissolution of the old Saturnian system became the archetypal imprint remembered as the dismemberment of the primordial giant, or the slaying of the primal father. Sometimes it was a son who ousted the father, sometimes it was a younger brother who overturned the rule of an elder brother, sometimes it was the virtuous son of the deceased father who took vengeance on a murderous, wicked uncle. In addition, sometimes these protagonists were portrayed as fighting over the same woman. Sometimes the younger god abducted or seduced the wife of the elder. Tom Van Flandern suggested that a large planet's sphere of influence, in this case the Saturnian magnetosphere, could be drastically reduced in size with proximity to another large body, such as Jupiter. Under such conditions, a large planet like Saturn may lose one or more of its satellites. It is here suggested that Venus was either initially excluded from the conjoined plasmasphere of Jupiter and Saturn, or was otherwise extruded from the Saturnian alignment by this point. In many myths, Saturn remained strangely submissive and hesitant, even when Jupiter carried his wife away. Displaced to the ecliptic, Venus would have spiraled away from Jupiter and Saturn like a comet towards the sun. Earth was apparently released from Jupiter and Saturn's briefly conjoined charge sheath, or subdivided from Saturn's plasmasphere soon after also. Earth may have uncoupled from Saturn's magnetosphere on account of the sudden entrance of Jupiter's overwhelming mass. In such a scenario, an individual charge sheath would have formed around Earth as it emerged from Saturn's plasmasphere, akin to the way an egg cell divides. With the magnetosphere now giving protection from cosmic rays, and an ionosphere giving protection from ultraviolet rays, Earth was only indirectly impacted by the radioactive exchanges of charge passing between the star gods above. It is here suggested that the sudden and dramatic exclusion of Earth from the Saturnian alignment during the midst of this episode became the archetypal imprint remembered as the separation of the heavens and the earth and the expulsion from paradise. Though some Saturnists have been reluctant to assign a chronological date to their golden era, it is here suggested that the era of Saturnian summertime was synonymous with the Holocene climactic optimum. Thus, the termination of the Saturnian Golden Age, or the Vedic Satya Yuga, and the opening of the Jovian Silver Age, or the Vedic Treta Yuga, as such, would have coincided with the fitful close of the Holocene climactic optimum and the end of the Neolithic subpluvial, punctuated by the intensifying aridification that characterizes the late 4th millennium BC, the opening of the dry and cold older subboreal period, and the archaeological early Bronze Age I, the era conventionally known as the beginning of history. As Velikovsky indicated, the increased distance between Earth and Saturn was most likely the result of both the removal of Earth from its place as well as Saturn from its place. The opening scenes of the divine spectacle would have been seen in the north skies, since Earth was still millions of miles below Saturn and Jupiter. But after Earth was released into a path of its own around the Sun, the plane of Earth's orbit would lift steadily, eventually reorienting at a steep inclination, crossing over the Sun's equatorial current sheet twice a year at each equinox. Thus, the eyewitness perspective on Jupiter and Saturn shifted at this time, so that the unfolding drama panned from the northern skies to a side view of the sky gods receding away in the southern night sky. Derailed from their dynamically synchronized alignment, Jupiter and the large Saturnian planets immediately redirected their orbital momentums into elliptical outward-bound spirals. Nearly all myths of the fall tell of the disappearance of the gods into the deep night sky. A distinct parallel may also be drawn to the teachings on Zimzum, the first stage of creation described in the Kabbalah, the self-contraction, concealing, shrinkage, or retreat of the god's original form into a new dilation or opening of space. Steadily diminishing in size and luminosity, receding away from Earth in the inner solar system, hiding himself, withdrawing himself, entering into himself, the contraction of departing god Saturn cleared space for a new creation. The Kabbalah continues, that Zimzum, contraction, was completely uniform all around, so that it left a vacant space called Tihiru, an empty, hollow, uniformly circular on all sides. Until this time, our ancestors would have had no concept of limitless space extending away from the earth because such conditions had never before been seen. Unfurling like a curtain drawn open, the old heavens progressively whirled away from earth on all sides. The primordial cosmic waters of the old Saturnian gaseous envelope retreated and withdrew, differentiating a deep open space in place of the rainy wall of clouds that shrouded earth in former times. The age of Jupiter, now upon the world, introduced mankind to the light of the stars in the darkness of the night. In Egypt it was Jupiter as Re who boasted, I am he who made the hours, so that days might come into being. Nuit was specifically the nighttime star-studded sky arched over the wide horizon, through which the red sun-like disk of Re journeyed each night. In the Iliad, Night herself apportioned Zeus's sovereignty to the wide heaven among the cloudy aether, a wide band of night sky centered on the ecliptic, from approximately 17 degrees north to approximately 17 degrees south, the way of Anu, likewise assigned to Jupiter as Marduk in the Near East. As the battling sky gods retreated through this expanding space into deeper and more distant reaches of the solar system, they discharged as brilliantly lit wandering stars, still huge in size, though far removed, lighting the night as nearby suns. All four outer giants still exhibit rotational speeds far out of proportion to their sizes. All four still emit significantly more energy than they receive from the sun, and they are in that sense stars even today. At first looming large near Earth, Jupiter became the new central body of the sky, more or less taking over Saturn's old identity. When Jupiter was first born, he defeated Saturn and the Sun by his brilliance, we are told in Vedic literature. It was then that Zeus became Lord of the bright skies. A stellar history for Jupiter was, in fact, much in vogue among mainstream astronomers through the 17th to 19th centuries, when popular astronomy famously speculated on the nature of Jupiter as a dark star, a hypothesis revived during the second half of the 20th century in light of the considerable implications suggested by data recovered from orbiting satellites and interplanetary explorers. Jupiter's wide-ranging variety of active emanations, infrared, radio, X-ray, and ultraviolet among them, have led others to consider Jupiter as a failed sun or a star yet to be. Jupiter's volatile magnetosphere would continue to display dramatic plasma instabilities as it distributed an excess of voltage. Progressively acclimating to an outbound spiral orbit, Jupiter's appearance would have been stupendous in size, visibly larger than the daytime sun. Jupiter's massive magnetosphere, today 10 times stronger than that of any other planet and about 4 times as wide as the Sun, would have fluoresced with brilliantly colored glow-mode plasma flows for some time thereafter, retaining enough of a mini discharge to give a semblance of starhood. Below Jupiter's glowing globe appeared a long beard, mantle, or cloak trailing all the way to the horizon below, a stupendous plume of plasma extending away from Jupiter's south geographic pole. This plasma expulsion would have been primarily an inflow of electrons, but simultaneously also an outflow of protons and other dissociated ions. Appearing as a steep, elongated cone, Jupiter's southern expulsion was also characterized as his royal mountain or throne of glory. In the Kabbalah, this appearance is remembered as the long-bearded Arik Anpin, the extended countenance of the newly crowned star god. He let out his throne above and stretched a part of his glory below. And the Ancient of Days did sit. His throne was fiery flame, and his wheels burning fire. For a cloak Marduk was wrapped in an armor of terror. With a fearsome halo his head was turbaned. On the other side of the world, Viracocha was similarly remembered as a tall, glowing, bearded man dressed in a long, flowing cloak, who came in a time of chaos to set the world to rights. In the following centuries, peoples throughout the world began constructing mountains of chalk and pyramids of stone, sometimes square, sometimes star-shaped, sometimes round, in the image of such polar plasma expulsions. These were the high places so often mentioned in the Hebrew books, on which the idolaters sacrificed to foreign gods. Much more recently, a comparable plasma expulsion has been witnessed emanating from both poles of protoplanetary nebula HD 44179. The distinct rungs or steps of this conical ejection are remarkably comparable to early pyramids, ziggurats, and mounds, and suggest that those imitative architectures were purposeful representations of what was visibly seen in the night skies by our ancestors here below. A smaller, less intense plasma discharge impinged at Jupiter's north geographic pole. This discharge appears to have bifurcated into 2 or more distinct flow vortices, broadening like plumes as they trailed away above the glowing globe. Seen from a distance, this expulsion was suggestive of horns, antennae, or a feather headdress. On some representations, these plasma plumes appear as wavering rays emanating from Jupiter's shoulders, such as in representations of Marduk. Even more impressive would have been the equatorial belts of glowing plasma within Jupiter's coma. The left and right cross-sections, where the toroid belts appeared most densely lit, stood out dramatically as 2 bright, watchful, and immobile eyes staring back at humankind. Eye icon figurines and amulets with dramatically glaring open eyes have been recovered in the Near East by the tens of thousands, and similar motifs are found as petroglyphs, as engravings on the walls of barrows, cave paintings, and other artifacts recovered globally. Identified by Anthony Peratt as a low-opacity torus, the most intense plasma currents would be concentrated at the center and be surrounded by a number of concentric shells. The fact that other facial features were less readily apparent was suggestive to some cultures of the god as wearing a mask or helmet. In later eras, this was further stylized as a totemic owl with garishly oversized eyes, sacred to Athena and Minerva, but also to Lilith and Moloch. The symbolism of the dreadful all-seeing owl has continued to mesmerize members of secret societies to this very day. When the Anunnaki raised their torches, lighting up the land with their brightness, the bewildering dark night imposed by Hadad was flooded by rippling streams and spreading sheets of glowing plasma. the diffuse cloud of gaseous debris spreading outward through the solar system essentially became a magneto-hydrodynamic medium through which vaporous trails of ionized dust lighted the night in electrified splendor. And when light mixed with darkness, it made the darkness bright. And when darkness mixed with light, it made the light dark. So it was neither light nor darkness, but rather a luminous gloom. The frequently rehearsed theme of the waters of space is extremely archaic. In the Zohar, this is the water stream which spread to an expansive sea or unfathomable deep. In Genesis, the deep is the Hebrew tehom, a word closely related to the Babylonian Tiamat, the Greek Tethys, and the Sumerian Tamtim, the celestial sea of salty waters that surrounded the glowing plain of the ecliptic. In the Zohar and other rabbinical literature, these waters are referenced repeatedly under various guises: floors of flowing marble, curtains of living waters, or misty veils of liquid light. An intriguing passage from the Kabbalah's teachings on the work of creation is particularly illuminating. Why are these called heavens, Shemayim? It is because the Holy One extended the heavens, Shemayim, as a veil, mingling the fire, Esh, with the waters, Mayim, spreading out the one with the other when he was creating the heavens, Shmayim. Therefore, you shouldn't read it as heavens, Shemayim, but rather as fire waters, Shmayim. The face of the deep was no longer dark. At first, a massive cloud circling the sun, enveloping the whole region of the inner planets, the fluorescing debris appears to have assumed a highly flattened, disc-like or lenticular distribution over time, and still extends all the way to the orbit of Jupiter today. Sometimes referenced as zodiacal light, the ethereal fire waters of the dust cloud once extended some distance either side of the ecliptic plane, both obscuring as well as highlighting the fixed stars of the zodiac. Today the residual afterglow or countershine of the zodiacal cloud remains visible as a tall, cone-shaped ribbon of soft light brightening on the plane of Earth's orbit before sunrise and after sunset. The interplanetary dust cloud, as such, represents the mortal remains of the primordial gaseous envelope dissipated during the collapse of the Saturnian configuration. Some of this debris may still remain suspended in the rings surrounding the giant planets. Earth would also wind up with its share of drifting dust and debris. Gas vapors, ionized meteoroids, and assorted celestial wreckage began falling through the magnetosphere with short-lived splendor. Heavier infalls of material through the ionosphere sparkled and fizzled out in the upper atmosphere as concentric circles and spirals aglow in the night. Migrating through the interplanetary cloud year-round, sweeping through the densest clouds of debris during each equinoctial pass through the solar current sheet, a near-Earth terrestrial dust cloud began to accumulate. Electrostatically suspended along Earth's equatorial plane, this dust cloud was sorted by the conductive sheaths of Earth's plasmasphere into rotating belts and rings. In the Zohar we read, "Then a great reservoir was formed out of the unfathomable deep, or tehom, just as if a huge hollow had been dug. This reservoir divided itself into 7 streams, resembling 7 long vessels, glimmering with a metallic sheen. All of them are in the form of concentric circles, like the layers of an onion, with rings inside each other." Most traditional mythologies retain memories of these earth rings. A rich profusion of descriptions handed down from remote antiquity and conserved to this day in several schools of esoteric thought have puzzled scholars and laymen alike for centuries. During the day, these debris rings appeared to some as concentric streams, rivers, or seas. To others, as a looming golden-green hill stretching from horizon to horizon, covered with wind-blown grasses. Some saw fields of wheat or beds of bamboo. Others beheld an expanse of beaten brass, a sea of reeds, or even an ocean standing in the southern sky. In Egypt they were known as the Duat, the realm traversed nightly by the red disk of Re. Encompassed by the darker waters of noon, the Duat was the famed court of the soul's last judgment, filled with a labyrinth of rivers, islands, fields, lakes of fire, mounds, caverns, metallic walls, and blue-green trees. In the Near East the rings were called the Absu, the sweet fresh waters bounded by the salty deep of Tiamat. In ancient Greece the rings were remembered as deep eddying, back-flowing okeanos, who circled round the whole earth in 7, or some sources say 9, concentric streams, himself surrounded by his mate and companion Tethys. Earth itself, illuminated by the sun at an angle offset from the bands of debris, cast a long, dark, penumbral shadow across the rings, a virtual crack in the sky that would glide from horizon to horizon across the rings every night. This shadowy crevice would also appear to expand and contract each year. At the solstices, this shadow would resemble an arched doorway, cave entrance, valley, tunnel, or corridor, the door to the underworld. Between solstice and equinox, Earth's shadow would lengthen and widen night after night, progressively obscuring more and more of the rings until portions on either side of the penumbra resembled a cleft mountain, 2 hills, or twin peaks. These were remembered as tall, woody mountains in Hesiod, the cedar and boxwood mountains of Mashu in Mesopotamian myth, and the ruptured turtle shell from which god El emerged in Mesoamerica. They were also often depicted on either side of Marduk on cylinder seals, and as the Akhet, or double-mounded horizon, surrounding the disk of Re in Egypt. All in all, the night sky, brilliantly illuminated by the backlit fire waters of space, became commonly understood as an aquatic underground abode of the gods, filled with rotating rivers and serpentine streams. Because the debris in the inner solar system was only a thin veneer of suspended gas and dust, a planet's bright globe would cast a glare, appearing as a thin curved streak with upturned edges, an enormous ship in which the nighttime sun sailed. The top portion of the halo would often be truncated on account of the narrowness of the interplanetary cloud, and the bottom curve of the boat would often be shadowed by Earth's penumbra on the terrestrial cloud, and thus appear as a relatively flat-bottomed barge. Jupiter was thus now understood to travel over the celestial waters in a boat, raft, skid, ship, or barge with a pronounced stern and bow. Then Re built himself a ship of cedar, and he launched it on the water in the evening time. Of such ilk also were the flat-bottomed Magar reed boats of the Near East, in which Marduk is depicted sailing. The position of the oars on all these barges indicates that the oars are not propelling the ship, but are rather steering the ship, which simply follows the drift of the celestial sea. This imagery is entirely distinct from a more archaic sunboat motif, the revolving sunlit crescent seen circling around the limb of golden-era Saturn. The sunboats of the Silver Age, in distinction, consistently displayed a flattened bottom or base, and a characteristically upturned stern and bow.